You're listening to the Leadership Blend Podcast.
I'm ready.
On the Thinking Out Loud Network. Check out the Thinking Out Loud Network at thinkingoutloudnetwork.com.
All right, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo D. Rice, and my correspondent,
Simone Cherie.
All right. So interesting things going on. Just a lot of stuff. I be going by the weekend. So I go by my part-time job, co-workers, and just like, y'all two shades crazy.
But today's kind of still a weekend for a lot of people.
Oh, that's right. Because it's
Day.
President's Day.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, everybody can kind of get that going. So what do we have on the rundown for today?
Yeah, so we have more 2020 updates. It was a big news heavy weekend for the Democratic 2020 race. We keep calling it the 2020 race, but it's almost just the Democratic presidential race. But there have been updates there. There's updates on those poll numbers. So we'll get into that election a little bit. We'll do another update on state politics because the presidential preference primary is coming up. Georgia does have new voting machines, and there are now updates because those have been delivered. So we've got kind of like first reactions. There's been some mock elections all around the state. People having issues with some of the machines, other people who are really excited about the new machines. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then you have a really interesting article, right, about online dating fraud.
I have a lot of interesting articles. I was like, I cannot believe some of these things are actual thing. But yeah, these are things. So
we'll get into all of that. Do you want to start at the top, work our way down?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So first thing, let's talk about 2020. Let's talk about updated poll numbers. So first we'll start with our current president because this is some good context for us. So presidential approval ratings are traditionally always between maybe 40 and 50%. Like 30s is considered low, 60s is considered high. So that's where the president usually falls. Today, our current president is at 45% on average approve of our current president. So just kind of use that as context for looking at these poll numbers. Right now, we have Biden as, according to the lead, by 538, according to their poll. He is number one, according to Rasmussen, and he's number two. Him and Sanders are tied, according to CNN. So we've still got the same two contenders going back and forth, depending on which poll you look at, as being number one in the presidential race. 538 has Buttigieg at number two in their spot, which I think is a really big jump.
Okay, so what is this that we're looking at? Like, what is this in particular? Because, last week it was a whole different dynamic. So what is this exactly?
I think this is kind of a result of, so the debate was a couple of weeks back, but I think there's been a lot of press that's come out since then. Joe Biden was on The View. Buttigieg was doing media over the weekend. I think right now what we're seeing is, in between these debates, candidates have to do two things. They have to raise a lot of money, and they have to maintain a lot of momentum. So the question just really comes down to who can do both of those things at the same time, who can raise a lot of money, who has a lot of momentum. Michael Bloomberg, thanks to his own money, has been running a lot of ads. So he's been running a lot of
I know.
ads.
I can't go on Facebook without seeing something about him.
And people have mixed reviews about that. And, for some reason, because he's self-funded, because he's self-funded, he's being judged a lot harsher in terms of how money is spent. Like, I've seen articles come up about just Michael Bloomberg spending money on Instagram and spending money on TikTok trying to get people to vote for him. That's what all candidates do. They spend money. But because it's his money, I think we're going to see a lot more headlines just solely around how he's spending his money on this campaign, because I think for voters, there's something that feels a little bit less democratic about it. Like, they feel like they want to be able to contribute to your campaign. And so you contributing to your campaign is essentially you. Well, you said this last week. You believe that it's just.
I was waiting for you to get. I was waiting for you to get to it. Like,
I guess I feel like there's a silver lining to that, is that you're not taking people's money. I don't know. I guess I think there's more than one way to look at it.
Let's not forget what he's running for. Mm-hmm. He is running for president of the free world, which means he will be the president of all ethnicities, all diverse groups in the United States.
Yeah.
So the concept that you can just jump into the race with your own money and kind of do what you want to do because nobody's really been contributing to a quote unquote campaign is the outright example of white privilege. And I never would say anything like this, but he is a blooming example of what we talk about when people say white privilege. I've never seen a good example. Well, I've never seen a good example, but this is one.
I think where this may be interesting is there's going to be some states where he's going to do better, like in Georgia, according to the Georgia Democratic Party, or WSB-TV. This is WSB-TV poll. Bloomberg is number 3. So he's right behind Biden and Sanders instead of Buttigieg or Warren or somebody else. So it's weird that in some states, his strategy and him not taking from the taxpayer, I guess, in a sense, is a good thing. Technically, it's voluntary dollars, but it's funny to me that he's doing so well, at least in that respect, and that people are noticing his ads. I mean, you want to get noticed. That's what you don't want to do if you're running for president. You don't want to fall behind. You don't want to disappear into the ether and have people wondering if you're still running or not. So, I mean, he is at least managing to do that.
So this does not reek of white privilege to you at all. This is not reek of white privilege.
He could be any color. I mean, Andrew Yang,
but he's not. Let's be very clear about this.
There's a lot of
He's
billionaires.
not.
There's a lot of wealthy people. Bernie is very wealthy. He could be self-funding.
Oh, Bernie has actually taken the time to actually put in the work.
But he
to
could
actually
self-fund if he wanted to.
But he does not, because he knows it's not a good look, and he knows how it would, the perception of it, which is exactly what we're seeing with Bloomberg. I have a huge problem with this. Like, I have a huge problem with this. A huge problem with this, because I'm like, when you can be a billionaire and actually come into a game at the last minute and fund yourself and kind of do what you want to do, that's a problem for me. So what does that look like when you get into the White House? Because clearly these are the rules you live by.
So you're just saying it's going to be a repeat of what we currently got, is what you're saying.
Actually, I think it'll be worse.
I honestly think it'll be
worse. I mean, Trump talks about having his money, but he still knows how to interact.
He goes to Mar-a-Lago every other week.
He still knows how to interact with the people. He's done some things that have been in an interactive role. The Apprentice. I mean, so he knows how to really do. No, that's not what I'm doing.
A man of the people.
But we're talking about perspectives and perception.
Yeah.
And perception-wise, he does know how to interact with people, whether it be good or bad. He knows how to interact with people. He didn't just come in here and start throwing around money and get into. He didn't do that. Bloomberg has done that. Now, the people that live in New York know him, which a lot of them don't have a lot of nice things to say about him. I don't know a lot about him. So for him to just come in and not have done the work like the rest of the candidates have been doing for the last, 8 to 9 months, I don't think it's fair. I think it's a blatant example of white privilege. And I have a problem with it. And a lot of these ads that I'm seeing have now become ethnic geared. So I'm seeing a lot of ads that are geared toward black folks. Oh, I'll support, black businesses and blah, blah, blah. Sir, you have not been on one debate stage with any of these candidates thus far.
No.
So how am I supposed to take you at face value at this point? Because the people of New York don't have a lot of nice things to say about you.
That is true. No, I also believe New Yorkers are probably a tough crowd in general. But
if you can get past New Yorkers.
But when you've been the mayor, I mean, so he was a 3-term mayor. For me, the problem is more so that not only that, he's 78 years old, right? Which we were just complaining that,
they're all old.
Right. We're just complaining about that. He's a philanthropist. I think he's running on this economic growth kick, because when you have money, you kind of just want to spend it economic vitality. That it just kind of becomes your token thing. I think my biggest fear is more so that. So he had a criminal justice background that was a little bit sketchy. Well, even more than that, when I think about Bloomberg, I don't think about successful policies necessarily. As the world became more health conscious, if you don't know, New York had this big gulp ban, and then it became one of the first cities of many cities to start cutting down on the amount of soda that were sold in certain places, like grocery stores and bodegas and things like that, because they felt like people were getting too obese. He tried, but he's kind of so when I think of him, I think about radical policies like that. I don't necessarily think about employment or housing stability. I don't think about any of those other things. Morning Consult, actually, I'm looking at Morning Consult's poll. They have him at number 3, a firm number 3. So, and that's a pretty big poll. Biden, Sanders number 1, and Biden's number 2 behind him. I do think this is officially swung. I don't see Elizabeth Warren at this point getting back in a number 1 or 2 spot. I don't see Amy Klobuchar doing that. I don't see Andrew Yang doing that. I don't see Tom Steyer doing
Yang already officially suspended his campaign.
Oh, has he?
Yes.
Okay.
Andrew Yang, DeVos, and it was 3 of them over the weekend that suspended their campaigns. But Andrew Yang was one of them, because I remember Kyle loved Yang.
Oh, yeah.
Shouts out to Kyle. Sorry, the Yang gang is no more. He suspended his campaign over the weekend. DeVos suspended his campaign over the weekend. And there was somebody else, I can't remember off the top of my head, but they all suspended their campaigns. I mean, at this point, it's the funny thing, because you do all this campaigning, you raise all this money, and then you get down to the almost finish line, and now you're down to brass tacks, and this is how you could do all that until it's time for people to start voting. And then when people start voting, it's like, yeah, we've been kind of riding with you on Instagram and social media, but yeah, when we really think about it, we don't really want you as president.
Right. That's true.
Which kind of sucks.
True.
Elizabeth,
because it's a race at first, and then it starts to get serious.
Exactly. And it's like people start having to pass the baton.
It was Michael Bennet, who was the U.S. Senator out of Colorado, who also suspended his campaign, which is fine, because from my understanding, his entire platform was just weed legalization. I don't think he had a single policy idea that he really championed outside of that. And I don't think he had much experience to speak to outside of that. So that means that we are down to 8.
Wait, who are the 8?
Right, because we've got Sanders, Biden, Bloomberg, Buttigieg, Warren still in, Klobuchar still in.
That's 6.
Oh, that's 6.
How about that?
Wait, Steyer's still there. Steyer's not suspended, so we're at 7. Don't shake it. We're just saying technically who has bowed out of the situation right now.
At this point, this is like, what are we really? Okay, if you're okay, to all my candidates, sir, madam, if you're not in the top 4 by now, then you're probably not getting there. So let's just go ahead and suspend the campaign and stop dragging this further, because it's February, fastly approaching March, and we still have 6 candidates just kind of hanging in the wind. Yeah, this can't be it. This can't be it. So whoever, madam, sir, if you're not in the top 4 by now, just go ahead and let's just call it quits and go ahead and throw your people behind somebody else.
Yeah.
Because we got to get this down.
This is a big month. That like if you can claim momentum in this month, they really think February is the big month, because if you think about it, there's only...
What, because the love month?
Well, no, but there's like 6 months left. There's really only 6 months left after February. And then it's basically voting time. Well, no, 8 months.
I mean, then
it's voting time.
Let's be clear. The reality is...
You think it's been important? It's been the wire for the last year.
Let's be clear. The actual candidate really needed January to November to really build something, keep it going, and really make it fire the last 3 months. That's the actual nominee. We ain't even gotten to that place yet.
True.
So, I don't see us getting there by March. So you're talking about maybe April that we actually will have a clear candidate. That's only April, May, June, July, August, September, October. And in the last 3 months, you needed to really be on fire.
Yeah, I agree. And that's when there's going to be a lot of stuff coming out. Yeah.
And by then, Trump is going to really kick in. Mm-hmm. So we've set whoever is going to be a nominee up for failure. Let's be very clear about that. Whoever the actual nominee is going to be, we have set you up for failure. I am sorry that this has happened to you, but unless... Actually, at this point, whoever is the nominee might need to have a lot of money, because you have to really go hard to really get a momentum going once these other idiots clear out the field and it's just you. So like I said, I feel like we've set the Democratic nominee up for failure, and good luck. I can't even say anything else but good luck. Like, you're going to have a hard way to go, because, you're fighting your own people right now. When your people are gone and it's just you and Trump is going to come down like a hammer. And yeah, I good luck.
All right.
Good luck.
Let's move to the state, to state politics really quickly. So Georgia has a session that's only about 40 days. It's supposed to be 40 working days. And usually that lasts from like the second, third week of January until early or mid-April. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer, but usually it's early to mid-April that the session is out. So, and Georgia has it in its constitution that they have to pass the budget. So the only job, not the only job, but if nothing else, that's essentially what our legislators have to do, is that they have to pass the budget. And that makes it very tough. It's the only thing that they're required to pass, which sounds like a very sound idea, like a very fiscally sound idea, but it makes appropriations, which is the appropriation of money, as it sounds, it makes that committee very powerful and very important. Because appropriations has to meet, they go over the governor's recommendations, they talk to the heads of all the different agencies, and they look at the budget. So that's your education budget, corrections budget, health budgets, the court systems. I mean, all of that money for the entire state, where the revenue is coming from and where it can go to. The governor lays out a plan, department by department, what he thinks should be cut, what he thinks should be added, what the rationale is, how that fits in line with his strategy. The governor's got a very clear strategy in terms of the state. He wants to focus on public safety. He wants to focus on education. He wants to focus on mental health. I mean, that was a big piece of his mental health and safety as well. So it's all under the public safety umbrella. But there's some very controversial cuts coming. He's proposed a $27.5 billion budget. So he's proposed a cut that is about $500 million. So the idea is, Georgia has been there's been 9 consecutive years of economic expansion since our Great Recession in Georgia. So the governor's budget is about being conservative and paying attention to the fact that while we were planning on growth, we didn't get quite as much growth as we thought we would get. So there's about a 3.2% rate of growth. A lot of the expenditures that the governor says that were a part of the budget before were based on the idea that we'd have more growth. So he's saying we're not in a recession. He's saying we're not declining, but we're not having as much growth as we thought we would have. So he's saying that this is the reason that we need to kind of scale some of these things back. A big part of his campaign as well was proposing teacher raises. So he wanted a $30,000 a year permanent pay increase for Georgia's teachers. There's 115,000 certified teachers. That's going to cost $483 million. So he made that promise and wants to keep that promise. That's at the top of his priority list. So just to clarify, his earlier promise was to raise salaries by an overall $5,000, and he thought he would do that incrementally. So he's already got $3,000. to be clear. So he's got another $2,000 that he's got to find a way to allocate before his term is up, because he promised $5,000 total. We've got $3,000 so far. That's cost $483 million. So now we're pulling this money from all these different departments. About 95% of the new money in this budget is going strictly to that, strictly to teachers, strictly to state employees. Which is, I mean,
How about to say, is that really the best place
so
for all of it, the bulk of it
so
to
I
go?
mean, we just had the doctors here talking about how important it is to retain teachers and how difficult it is to retain good teachers
And principals.
And principals, yeah. So I mean, that includes all state employees. So I also think they're talking about principals. I think they're talking about educators in general, as long as we're focusing on public institutions. So there's a $71 million revenue shortfall reserve from the previous year. That's still there. It's kind of considered like a rainy day fund for the state. That's something that we think is very important and very healthy. So our savings account is now about 10% of our total revenue, which is really, really high. A lot of people have kind of proposed that we use some of this rainy day funds. We don't have to cut so much from all the other departments. That's a controversial initiative to put forth. But basically, last week there was no, and actually today as well, there were no committee hearings, right? So none whatsoever. Not the Judiciary Committee meeting, not the Education Committee meeting.
That sounds unusual. Why?
Well, appropriations has to get done, right? And so the sooner they get that done, the sooner they can focus on everything else. It's very difficult.
So everybody's waiting on money.
It's very difficult to legislate around money, right? So it's like they can have the conversations, and it doesn't mean that you don't want to make sure you can count your votes, but at the same time, you can't really move on them because there may not be the money there in the first place. So I follow the criminal justice reform really closely, obviously, and I do remember a couple of committee meetings where there were cuts. There are cuts expected to come from the Juvenile Justice Department, about $19 million coming just from juvenile justice. So there's a bill right now, House Bill 440. It's about raising the age. So that bill basically says that at the age of 17, we will no longer put juveniles in adult prison. That's a bill that's been proposed in the state of Georgia. A lot of the agency heads from court systems, from Superior Court, from Juvenile Court have kind of said, hey, if we're going to move 17-year-olds, keep them all in the juvenile system rather than moving them to the adult system where a lot of them are now, we're going to need more money for the juvenile system. And if you're going to take $19 million, I don't know if we can raise the age. So there are a lot of implications about, can we do the things that we want to do without that money? So that's why it's so important that the budget gets done. And this may come to a standstill for quite a while until people feel like we've got the numbers and we know what we can work with in terms of staff. Because while there are some departments that are saying we won't have to cut staff, there are others that are saying, well, I can't be sure, I may have to cut staff. A lot of these departments, too, have vacancies in the first place. And so maybe they were planning on hiring so they could be a little bit more efficient. Well, they can't hire. The money's not going to be there to fulfill that person's salary.
The more I hear this, especially when we talk about prisons and juvenile justice, I just see like these prisons with no guards. And I just see them, just turn into absolute chaos. And it makes me nervous. Because I know I'm from South Carolina, shouts out to South Carolina, and I know that correctional officers are always, that particular position is always needing to be filled. Mm-hmm. So that, in my head, I'm like, okay, well, let's say that a prison floor is supposed to have 10 guards and you only have 5.
Right.
So what does that mean? Yeah. So what does that mean when you only have 5 guards? You're supposed to have 10.
Twice as many prisoners per guard, which makes them very fearful, right? I mean, there was just a huge lawsuit in Mississippi, and Cobb County has actually just been hit with a lawsuit because 8 prisoners have died in Cobb County jail. 8 inmates in the last 12 months. 8 people. Of things like dehydration, people not being checked on, people who have medical needs and aren't being checked on. And that comes a lot of times from short staffing. And that's exactly what the warden, and the sheriff said, that we don't have the staff. Like, we've got too many people for the staff. So this is what happens. Now, Tuesday, if you don't know how the budget goes, the House votes on it first, right? The House has the Appropriations Committee. It has to be approved on, then it will go to the Senate. That's how it works. And then the governor, obviously, to approve. So the governor's given them all these proposals. It's very hard for people to for House and Senate, that is, to act against the governor, right? They need his authorization. They need those funds. Typically speaking, they're kind of stuck in terms of, unless they're all united, a lot of times they're pretty much stuck on what the budget's going to be. So the House should vote this week. The House will probably vote tomorrow or early this week. And then it'll go to the Senate after that. So we'll see. There's a $200 million total that has to be cut, and we'll see if the House agrees on it. But if not, then we're going to be in appropriations for a little bit longer because the legislators definitely need something to legislate around. So,
I mean, again, this just makes me very worried, and it makes me kind of concerned because I'm just like, again, you think about all these vacant positions and, they're not filled as is. So now you're saying, okay, well, Now we're never going to fill them because we don't have the money to fill them. What does that really mean for these things? And, FYI, people, when we talk about budgets and stuff, particularly federal budgets, because when I was younger, I was guilty of this, of thinking, it doesn't affect me.
Mm-hmm.
It does affect us. At this point,
especially at the state level, yeah.
At this point, it's a blatant, you need to know what's being cut or what's being proposed to be cut in these budgets. Especially, a lot of times we go to things, we don't realize they're government agencies. When you get your little SNAP benefits and you get your food stamp stuff, these are all government agencies. Absolutely. But when you hear this stuff being talked about in budgets, and they're talking about the SNAP program, baby, that's your food stamps. And they talking about cutting this down, they talking about changing all the rules and about able-bodied people, and it's a whole, and I really want to get into it today, but it's really got to be dissected more so I can really break it down. But people, this is no joke. Like, a lot of these government agencies they're talking about pulling money from, it directly affects a lot of you guys, especially those of you that are on, and I can't stress this enough, especially those of you that are on food stamps. And that doesn't just go for people with kids, that also go for disabled, that goes for the elderly. All this stuff will directly affect you. So now is the time to be vested and start listening to these candidates. What are they standing for? What do you stand for? What are you talking about? What is your platform? You need to know, because whatever person we put in the White House, be it Trump or whoever, this is the stuff they have to decide on.
Another thing that's important, I think we should underline too, is Department of Revenue, right? So the state taxes that we get, I don't know if a lot of people unfortunately do receive big tax refunds. It's devastating.
Oh my
it's
God,
poor financial planning, but they do. And the state is slower and slower. You can get slaughtered
for that statement. That's what
it's horrible, and we should get into that a different day. But the state is also can be increasingly slow in getting those done and getting those back to people. I think it was either last year or tax year 2018 where the state said that they would need as late to June to get some tax refunds back to Georgia taxpayers if they're expecting a refund of over like $300. That could get longer and longer and longer if they're not able to fill the jobs that they have to fill. They're a state department. They require the state's money to function. So, well,
the scary part is, because like I said, I have a part-time job where I work, and they all got these huge tax refunds, and now they're just like, oh my God, I love Trump. He just got me a big tax. Okay, baby, let's look at this. Now, you getting a $9,000 return, which you've already spent a good fraction of it. I would say a good 50% of it trying to catch up on bills. So that leaves the other 50, which you're not going to save. You're probably going to splurge and go on some kind of vacation, and then you're going to fall back on them food stamps. Now, that's cute, but when you go back to fall on them food stamps when you're used to getting $500 a month and now you're getting $100, yeah.
Bring your coworkers here. I'm tired of hearing about these coworkers. You need to bring them here. We all need to speak to them.
I just listen to their conversation. And honestly, that's how I set the precedent for what we discuss. Because I really listen to them. Because they're everyday people. So I listen to their conversation. I'm like, you don't have a clue about what's really going on. And this tax return thing, like one of my coworkers got, of course, she claims somebody else's kids. She got like $9,000. And she was in heaven. She was like, I've never gotten as much money back. Thank you, Trump. And I'm like, baby, oh my God, this has very little to do with Trump. And we start a whole nother conversation. They're just like, oh my God, I didn't know that. I know. So I need you not to get excited about things that are very short term. Because you're going to have long-term issues.
We need you to invest is what we need you to do. Don't give the government free money. This is devastating. Do we have time to cover online dating before we move on? Because I really want to hear about this.
Joan, introduce yourself.
Yes,
y'all have heard this voice before. Yes. She's in again with us today, so introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Joanne Darkety, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Ricardo. It's always a pleasure to join you. And my sister here, you look lovely. Glad to have you as well, and glad to be a part of what you all are doing. So I love the people. Thank you. Happy President's Day to you all.
All right, so we're going to get into, we've talked about budgets, which is that's a headache in itself.
A lot of money's leaving. That's the end of the conversation.
We're going to get into something else. Okay, so out of all the disturbing headlines, and God knows there are enough of them, I think the one that got me the most was, which is funny, because we're talking about people not really having extra money, but clearly you have enough money to give to somebody overseas that says they're in love with you. Oh, so Americans lost $201 million in online romance scams last year. So if you don't know what that means a lot of your coworkers, people, friends got scammed by somebody overseas that said they were in love with them and they tapped into their bank account or whatever the case may be. So yeah, $201 million on romance scams last year. So
is this like somebody sending money to like cover somebody's cost of living expenses, or is this like
money this is what it says. So romance scammers start off with fake profiles using someone else's identity. Their alleged location is never in your city. They claim to be deployed in the military, working on an oil rig, or as a doctor embedded with international groups. That's what the FTC says, which is Federal Trade Commission. That way they can ask for money to pay for seemingly legitimate costs such as travel visas, plane tickets, and hospital bills. When asking for money, romance scammers rarely use regular money transfer processes such as a checking account. They opt for gift cards so they can turn them into cash. Gift cards are for gifts, not payments. Anyone who demands payment by gift cards is always a scammer, according to the FTC. After they get the gift card number and it's PIN, then they immediately retrieve the money loaded on it, and the process is difficult to reverse. Once they've done that, the scammers and your money are gone, usually without a trace.
Wow.
So now here is my kind of issue with this. So for those of you that watch TV, there is a show called 90 Day Fiance.
That's exactly what this sounds like. Go ahead.
It's called 90 Day Fiance. It's a thing. Now, this is where we get into problems because we start normalizing things.
Yeah.
So watching, and there are spin-offs of this show. So there's not just 90 Day Fiance. There's 90 Day Fiance.
Right, there's like an overseas version.
There's an overseas. There's like 4 other versions of this show.
Okay.
So now we start to normalize the fact that I met somebody online. I watched one story about a guy. He met some lady, I think Yugoslavia, pretty girl. They had been talking for 5 years. They never met. Every time they were supposed to meet, it was something come up.
Kinda like
they were
Catfish.
only doing, it was kind of like, it's like an abridged version of Catfish. They were chatting and video chatting. Now, the thing that got most of us was when she did the videos and sent them to him, they were never his name. It'd be like, oh baby, I can't wait to see you. Oh baby, you're handsome. It's never, I can't remember his name. It's never like, hey, George, I want to be with you. It's always, oh baby, I love you, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, at this point, where do we draw the line to say, okay.
So was she a serial dater? She was just sending out blanket videos to all kinds of dudes?
Well, he met her on a dating app, and I guess he thought that they got off the app and were just talking exclusively. But I guess the better thing about 90 Day Fiance is they do segments with the person overseas. So they did a segment with the lady sitting down with her friends, and it was like, oh, well, I can't remember her name. Well, how did you meet George? And she was like, well, no, George is, George and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, okay, so,
every time I watch these, the person overseas is playing the hell out of whoever is living here. Every time I watch it, they're just like, it's a check.
But the scary part about it is, unlike Catfish, they usually do meet up somewhere, and sometimes you do see a lot of success cases. Really? So again, it kind of normalizes it to say, okay, well, you can really find this kind of romance, and but these are anomalies. This cannot be the status quo, because if it was, you guys, family members, cousins, friends, would not have lost $201 million on online scams. It's like,
that's a lot of money.
But again, we gotta start normalizing. We gotta stop normalizing things, because when we normalize them, then people think this is a way of life, and maybe I can find love. And I'm not saying you can't, but the likelihood is just not high.
There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, and we see that side about the loss, but there's a lot of exploitation in the dating industry in general, and people have been traveling overseas. You go to the Caribbean, you go to African countries, you go to different places, you see older people getting their groove on with younger people and exploiting that way. And so I think that this is just a new medium. It's been put on blast, unfortunately, but hey, that, there's, you win some, you lose some. And I'm not saying that it's a good thing to normalize it, but I'm saying it's a symptom of something greater that's going on all over the world, whether it's Thailand, whether it's Africa, whether it's, Brazil. Think about that image of how many people have been going to Brazil forever. And the young women there, I'm just using that country as an example.
Yeah, but it's one thing to go for a summer fling, and you might meet somebody you like, and then y'all stay in touch. But versus us starting out on a dating app, and you in the Ukraine, I'm in the United States.
It's loneliness culture. I think people
exactly.
are lonely.
People are very, very lonely, and it's symptomatic of something. Wanting that love, to find that love, and they want it in a way that's unrealistic. Everyone wants to be whipped off their feet, and they're gonna pay for it.
That's true. I think like the way that I was just thinking about this, because they were talking about, I was watching some meme. It was basically saying how great it is that you can have friends in your phone that you don't actually have to meet, or like spend a lot of time with. You can just have friends on your phone. And I was like, when you put it that way, I love technology.
Yeah,
when you put it that way, I was like, it's actually very convenient. Like there are so many people that you can have access to on your phone. I think the problem is though, especially when it comes to dating, and I'm not trying to call. Well, yes, I am. There's a lot of people who are just very. I don't think that people are emotionally mature enough to engage in the activities that they engage in. Like if you watch some of the things that people will say yes or say no to, it's like they'll see somebody with dimples and just be like, oh no, I don't do dimples. Or they see the main picture of somebody.
Preference.
No, but this is why you alone though. Is what I'm saying.
What?
Because people are so quick to just be like, oh, is that him and a dog? Oh, I hate guys who just pose with their dogs, and a lot of people are just way too picky to possibly have a genuine connection with somebody else because they're on that shallow.
I feel like you're talking to me. I feel some kind of way about this. Like I feel targeted right now in this conversation. Yes,
projection.
Because both of y'all are married, which sucks. I mean, and I'm the single one here and the oldest. So wow, this really just.
Are you really the oldest?
Oh, stop it, Ricardo.
I'm 40.
Okay.
40 is the new 28.
I'm 40.
First of all, men in their 40s are usually the ones running around with 20-year-olds. So let's not even start there.
Okay, well, I don't want to do that. That's not hot.
Here, I want to ask you about and we should all disclose this. Let's talk about our online presences because there's a term called kitten fishing that I wanted to discuss today. So there's an app called Hinge that I guess technically officially coined this term, but articles started coming out about kitten fishing last fall.
What is kitten fishing?
Kitten fishing is a term, again, coined by Hinge, where you present an unrealistically flattering image of yourself online. So rather than catfishing where you're totally fake, you may be kitten fishing. Example, using pictures of yourself in which you are 10 to 20 pounds lighter than you are.
Oh, so that's what we're calling that now?
Using pictures of yourself.
I didn't know.
Yes, where you are 5 years or 10 years younger than you are. It's essentially a light version than catfishing. You are pretending to be a different person online. Maybe showing a picture of yourself with a group of friends, knowing that you have none.
There was a girl who had a photo shoot. She's an influencer on Instagram. And she did her photo shoot in IKEA, and she was pretending to be on an exotic getaway in Thailand.
Right.
And so how people are leveraging, I guess, their experience and their influence when they're just making it up and trying to get more likes.
Right.
But I guess that has always been the question. Mm-hmm. So the concept of catfishing is you're presenting something that you are not. Yes. That's the concept behind catfishing.
Completely not.
So if I technically use my picture, which happens to be 10 years old,
but it's still you.
It's still me.
And it's not in your caption that, by the way, I look nothing like this anymore. Unless you still do.
But that's not the issue. Catfishing says I'm presenting somebody that is not me.
Not
so if I use a picture that is 10 years old, it's technically still me. It's technically still me.
But
it's just an outdated
never
me.
Coming back. So here's the thing.
But they could.
But no, they can't.
Weight
You will
loss
never be
is
10
up
years
and down.
younger again.
Weight loss is up and down.
You'll never be 10 years younger again. That's what I'm saying. If you still look like the picture, that's one thing. But like another example is you could just be over-exaggerating your accomplishments, or you could just be straight up lying about your accomplishments. But really what it is just over-exaggeration. So maybe your picture's just heavily edited. It's heavily doctored, right? So where your skin looks flawless, but you know that your skin is a hot mess. Or maybe you patched in a couple bald spots because you can do that really easily, and you have those bald spots.
I feel like you're singling me out again.
No,
right? Because I happen to be bald. I feel like I'm being singled out
me?
again.
Women are probably incredibly guilty.
Let's not get into the witchcraft that is makeup and
witchcraft
weave.
Is extreme.
It is.
Witchcraft is extreme.
Witchcraft. No, I've seen some witchcraft.
That is extreme.
I've seen some witchcraft cases.
I've seen it too, and I was just like, oh my God.
They show them on Facebook all the time, like these transformations. This is sorcery. This is sorcery. Like there was one guy that got married, and he gets home and she wakes up the next day and he's like, who the hell are you? It's like no makeup, no lashes, no weave, no sew-ins. Ladies. Joke. Y'all take this to a whole nother level. Like it's sorcery at this point.
It's not, please.
It's sorcery.
No,
but that's the idea. And I think that everyone does it in a slight way because quote unquote, your Instagram life is just so perfect and it's all smiley and happy and you're always productive or you're always very successful on your Instagram profiles for the most part. But there is a new wave, I think, forming around this buzzword of authenticity and people who are authentic and how they're getting so much. And sometimes it's not cute. There's this YouTuber I started binging on like 2 weeks ago.
Oh God.
For no reason. Named Emma Chamberlain, who's like a teenager. I have no idea why, but she popped up. I thought she was so funny. And I was just like, and she's quote unquote part of this new brand of just being authentic. And authenticity, like if you realize it, we're really not used to seeing people with all their acne up in the camera this close. Mm. And that's her thing. We're really not used to seeing people like, in some of the situations you find herself and see the face you're making. That's kind of the face I was making.
It's like,
but then I have to check myself and be like, a lot of people have acne, Yeah,
but I don't know if I want to watch it.
But so that's my point, is that we are so used to seeing things that are prettied for us that we really don't know how to just accept people as they are, and that's why people go online and they won't be as they are. So I think that this is going to change. We have to start being more authentic. You have to start taking pictures with your roles. You have to start. You do. You have to start taking.
Oh,
pictures.
no, because because that's going the opposite side of that.
Yeah.
Now, when Lizzo did it in all her big glory at that basketball game, everybody went ballistic about,
I-
oh my
I
God, a
saluted.
big girl with a G-string
I still
on,
saluted.
twerking and working on the at the basketball court. She was being her authentic self, even
Well,
when she
that's
takes
what we
naked
think.
pictures.
How did you feel?
You know, I wonder if that it really is her authentic self, or if she's just promoting a brand and an image.
I mean, she takes pictures naked and all that good
Well,
stuff.
good
so
for her. You know, the way how I look at it, I was listening to Michelle Obama this morning when she was interviewed with Oprah, and she was talking about how her book was received, and it was because of her being her authentic self. And one of the things I could say is there's room for all of that. The real thing is, for me, it's about intent. Are you trying to deceive, or is this an element of yourself? Of course, I'm going to come here and I'm not going to look like how I just look when I woke up in the morning, didn't brush my teeth yet, didn't get dressed. But am I being fake right now? Absolutely not. This is a version of myself. It does not mean that we can't go hiking and I'm gonna have my do-rag on when we go. And that's another authentic self. It's just about, how am I presenting myself and with what intent? And a lot of people are literally malicious with it because they're trying to deceive, you know, and they are trying to get over, and they're using certain things to manipulate other people. That's wrong. But if you're coming and you're beautifying yourself to look, to serve, to do things, and that's you, you know, and then in another image, that's you, you know. But I think that when it's only one side, or when you're trying to deceive, that's what I have a problem with. So
I mean, okay, so technically, let's take this to the law.
let's take
Let's take it to the law.
next level.
Okay.
So it's in the law, especially criminal law. It's all about intent.
Yes.
So I guess that will make the difference between catfishing and kitten fishing.
That's it.
Is the intent? Why you sweating your?
I'm listening.
Why you sweating your eyes at me? I mean, I guess it's about the intent. To
That's
Joanne's
what I'm
point, it's about the
saying.
intent. I mean, if
I
your
can post
intent,
a picture of myself, my baby picture on my profile. You know that's not me right now, but it's
We should
just to
hope.
be
But yeah, and hopefully
nostalgic,
your
right?
caption don't say, "Hey, this
but
is
then
me."
if I'm like, oh, you know, I'm 115 pounds, I want you to date me, and I put that in my profile, then I'm deceiving somebody
But,
because I'm not.
but here's the
115.
thing: when you watch Catfish, there are so many well-intentioned, morbidly obese liars on the other end of
I
that
don't know about
camera.
catfish.
No,
I don't know about that.
I'm not
If you
talking about
ask
catfish.
them, if
No.
you ask them, they swear this was me. This
No.
was real.
They know better.
We connect. Okay, but see now you're saying
They-
That's
So
lies.
But how you gonna tell somebody they're lying when they're
Oh
telling
my
you
gosh,
their
'cause they're
intent?
lying. No,
But
no,
if
no,
the
no,
person's
no, no, no,
intent,
no, no.
what I'm saying is you can judge intent, but you don't know intent.
well,
No.
technically,
Lizzo says that her intent was just
technically-
to have a fun time at her game.
but technically, if we go
She's
by
performing.
the
She's an
steps that are
artist.
taken to fuel the intent, so if you intentionally go to somebody else's profile and because that's identity theft.
That's criminal.
That's identity theft. If you go to somebody else's profile, take their pictures, put them on your thing, and use your name, that is identity fraud.
Yeah.
So your intent, I don't, for all intents and purposes, you're wrong.
That's wrong.
That's wrong.
Okay,
Actually,
so
that's a
now
criminal
what you're-
offense.
now
That's
what you're
actually
That's a
going-
criminal.
Now what
That's
you're
a
going
criminal
back on
offense.
is that it's not about intent, it's about what you do.
No.
I mean, it's still
no.
intent. It's still your
Intent.
intent.
That person's
Your
intent,
intent
was to get to know
causality.
you.
No,
No,
that's
no.
deception.
That person's
That is
intent, I'm just
deception.
speaking as
No.
as those people say. What they
No.
say is my intent was to get to know you, and I knew I wouldn't be able to get past your radar looking the way I look. They'll swear
Which
up and
I've
down.
never understood.
They'll swear up and
But
down
they're
that this is the only way I could have got to know
They're
you.
deceiving
And half the
themselves.
time, the person's just mad because they really were vibing with that person. And they really just are disappointed about what that person. A lot of times they feel hoodwinked, completely bamboozled, and all that connection and spark is just lost. And then it's like, okay, well, but you were vibing with that big person, so maybe you should just be with that big person.
I mean,
But
look,
they don't want to do it.
we do not.
So then I feel bad because I'm like, okay, well, they were wrong for lying, but you just proved that you're shallow. You just
No, I don't like. I don't
When
think
you're
it's
deceived,
shallow.
that's not being
It is
shallow.
not shallow to like what you like. Now that's all this. That's
That
to
is
me.
shallow.
That is shaming. If I say
yes, I'm shallow shaming. I'm
No,
shallow shaming.
you cannot
If you
shallow-
can fat shame. I can shallow shame.
you get shallow shame. If my desire, if I say that I'm not attracted to individuals that may be of a certain weight class for a specific reason that it doesn't work for me, I have that right. The
Okay.
problem is, and you actually said it. The problem is people don't like disappointment, and I think that's a lot of at this core of stuff. People don't want to be disappointed. I had a conversation with one of my proteges, and he always talks about his weight and he doesn't like it and so on and so forth. But he hasn't had the means and the time to actually really get in the gym to get his body to look the way he wants it to look.
Mm-hmm.
So my thing to him was, well, until you feel comfortable in your skin, nobody else. That's how everybody else
I
perceives
agree.
you.
I agree.
So this ideology of I don't want to be disappointed. So as a result, I do this is unacceptable. If there's things you don't like about yourself, nobody's, even those of us that are Christians, Jesus is not going to come down to slim your body down.
That's right.
You got to get off your happy hide and go to the gym, change your eating habits, whatever the case may be. If you don't feel like you're smart enough, then take your happy hide to school and read more books. But you getting on, with all these remedies, there's no excuse for you to take somebody else's pictures.
You can pinch yourself in different places.
Has
Has
look,
anybody seen The Circle? Has no one seen The Circle?
I started watching. It was just too weird for me.
So here's why you should watch it and finish watching it.
I haven't seen this.
It's on Netflix.
Okay.
The Circle's on Netflix. It's a show. They've got one season out. It's essentially a social media contest. Who can become an influencer? Basically, they put 10 people in a house. They can't see each other physically ever. They have to just have a profile and use that profile to try to gain points with people.
It's so weird.
And there was such a contest about who was authentic and who was not. You would see people in their full form, who they were. They would say something like, what's up, everybody? Something simple. And the backlash that would come from that, people saying,
wow.
oh, they're fake. That's fake. I think that's a catfish. I think that person's fake. Oh, nobody's that happy all the time. Nobody's that sweet all the time. That person's fake. Meanwhile, you as an audience know that person's real. So it's like, you don't know what's real on the other end of your screen. You don't know. And I hate when people, I just don't think we do a good job trying to judge someone's sincerity. If they say they're being sincere, if they say that they, showed up with their ass out because that's just who they are, then who are you to say that that's not who they? Just because you wouldn't do it, and I wouldn't do it or whatever. But it doesn't harm anybody. So it's like,
I mean, I think
careful.
with that point, you're right. You can't judge a person's intent necessarily, but you can see their actions and you know
right.
them by
That's
their
true.
fruits.
That's true.
So that's the first thing. Apart
true.
from that, even with the comment I made about Lizzo and her having her behind out, she's an entertainer. That means that she's paid to entertain.
Yeah.
And so whatever falls underneath that, I see as entertainment. So it looks like she's going to a basketball game, but with a G-string out, whatever, it's for attention, it's for likes, it's part of her entertainment ensemble. That's how I read it.
Yeah.
So whether she would do that as Lizzo, the daughter, Lizzo, with the relationships in the people in her life, I don't know. But I see her as an entertainer. So everything I see under that package. So that's how I read that. The last thing I'll say is on that point is just people will receive you, but you have to know as an influencer, who are your people, and your people have to know you. So if I'm out there and I'm making a social media, I know that I'm not going to resonate with everybody. Some people are going to be like, she's too serious. She take herself too seriously. But my people will be like, that's my girl, because that's who my message is for. So I know it's not for everybody. And there'll be people who'll be like, she's too dark. She's too this. She thinks she's smart. She thinks she always got to. Whatever. You're not my people. And that's okay.
I agree.
We're not in the same tribe. My message is not for you.
All right. So good. Actually, on that note, that's a good place to segment into, because now we're getting into identities.
All right.
So 3 female students filed a lawsuit against Connecticut transgender athletic policy. So basically, the lawsuit argued that teen track athletes Selena Soel, Chelsea Mitchell, and Elena Smith have been deprived of honors and opportunities after losing track and field races to biological males who identify as females, thanks to the Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic Conference's policy allowing students to compete based on their gender identity. The girls are represented by the Conservative Alliance Defending Freedom, which argued that the policy violates Title VI, a federal law designed to create opportunities for women in education and athletics, and reverses nearly 50 years of advances for women.
Wow, and wow.
We had this conversation last year.
We did.
And the conversation was, just because I identify as a specific gender, does that give me the right to participate in gender-specific fields? Now we're seeing it. Is it fair?
Absolutely not, because biologically, you have a biological male running against a biological female. And as much as we can say that person identifies, we want to have respect, we want to be open and so forth, they were never even, because for eons and eons, women and men just haven't run or, had the same physical strength at the same level. So I feel like it's not fair. Now, life has never been fair.
Facts.
So,
Facts.
Do we say that those 2 identifiable women should not be allowed to participate? That's where it gets hairy, because if the law is already saying that they deserve to be a part of the sport, then you can't technically disqualify them. But is it fair on a biological level? Absolutely not. It's not.
Well, here's the problem. So we have as a society, especially now, we have this, and I say it all the time, we have this very long table. And at one time, this table was a little smaller, and there was certain groups that were represented at this table. But as we've gotten progressive, now this table keeps getting longer and longer, and we keep inviting people. And the more people you invite to a table, the more palates you're trying to please. So you may not like chicken, and you may not like beef, and now we got to bring in an extra chef because they can't feed this half a table.
Right.
And that's kind of where we sit as it pertains to transgenders, because what we said was, oh, you identify as a woman, but you're a man.
Come on.
Okay, that's cool.
That's
Come on,
cool.
have a seat at the table. Oh, you're a man that identifies. You're a woman that identifies. Come on, have a seat at the table. Without doing any research, without deciding how that's going to affect everybody else already sitting at the table, we just said everybody come sit at the table. We'll just bring in a bunch of other chefs, and we won't have to worry about it. Nobody thought about the back end, and of course, this is an example. This is just an example. Nobody thought about. That's exactly my point. Nobody thought about the kitchen staff. Nobody thought about the kitchen staff. So when you bring in 5 different chefs, and these chefs say, well, I need a different type of fryer, or I need a different type of stove, or I can't use the ingredients that are in the kitchen, even in the back end, you still get a mess. What do you think about the front end? So here we sit now saying, okay, transgenders, whatever you identify as, you can participate in. So if I'm a man that identifies as a woman, I can participate in woman-led athletics. That's cute. But what does that do for the women in those athletic departments? Because I'm still a man. Now, I don't know, and I have to do some research on if I start taking hormones, estrogen and stuff, how does that change my makeup?
That's the key of this whole argument.
I don't know how that
changes
your makeup.
Because even between women, there are different testosterone levels and different estrogen levels. And I do think that it's pretty scientifically clear, I think with the exception of a couple sports like swimming and endurance running, testosterone is an advantage in sports, and pretty much all sports across the board. But even woman to woman, there are different testosterone levels. So the question is, where do you draw the line? It becomes a scientific argument. Like, where do you decide that what's the X number of testosterone that makes it unfair for you to compete in this sport?
I wouldn't even take it to a hormonal level. I mean,
but that's the difference, though. That's because that's
we're talking about genetics, that we have to.
Genetics and hormones are not the. I mean, they're part of the same thing, but they're not the same.
But
you can say
for sports it is, because that's the only. Because that's the reason why. That's the reason why in so many of these cases they're saying that these athletes have outworked other women. Testosterone is the only scientifically proven advantage between men and female sports. It's the only proven advantage. Now there are height advantages, weight advantages, muscle advantages, but there are plenty of outliers.
Biological.
Yeah, but there are plenty of outliers to all of that.
My point is
thin men, big women.
Yeah, I'm about to say, because
men are biologically constructed differently than women. A lot of times.
In what way though?
Physically, anatomically,
but
like literally structured. Their muscle mass and where it's located.
But I'm sure you could find women that would break that.
Because I've seen women that are bigger than me.
And men with big.
But those are almost
areas.
like anomalies. Biologically, women are made. I'm not talking about height, like you could go to certain regions, whatever. But overall, women are not. We don't have the same muscle composition in certain places. Certain things as men. I know that testosterone. To your point, perfect point, is a factor, but there's also just how we're literally constructed. And I mean, do I have to get graphic? It's just
but a penis and a vagina have nothing to do with it.
But I'm talking about other anatomical differences too. Just muscle mass. A woman is stronger in her thighs. Men are stronger in their arms.
Generally, but there are plenty of female gymnasts gymnasts, CrossFitters,
and
Olympic
if you compare
lifters
them
who
to,
don't look like
you're
that.
absolutely right. And if you compare them to a male counterpart that's also different, there is no competition between the two for strength. You have the strongest female and you have the strongest male. Both of them are freaks according to their own, gender. But you put them up against each other, the woman will not ever be able to.
That's not true in every sport. Not at all. There are some sports where there really are very, very minimal differences, like period. Like that.
You can always find an anomaly. Okay.
There are some sports where, pretty much that's going to be the case. But they said with the exception of like running and swimming.
So if I pump you with testosterone right now, you're saying that you could compete.
Not necessarily me.
The average woman with testosterone right now, you're trying to tell me that with training she can compete at the same level as the most.
It depends on the sport.
It does depend on the sport. I will agree with that. It does depend on the sport.
That's what we're talking about is the sport. We're not talking about like trans rights. We're not talking about anything. But just in terms of competing against a sport, the question of fairness comes down to one's physical fairness, right? So when it comes to runners, a lot of runners, men and female, both tend to have the same body type anyway. Some are taller, some are shorter. If you're an endurance runner versus a sprinter, your leg length, all of that plays a really big factor. Genetics play a really big factor. But there are definitely, this is the only thing that we can really control for scientifically. Everything else is anecdotal. Everything else could be considered social or biased. It comes down to science here.
You know,
what can we prove?
I won't profess to be the expert on this, so I'll digress in a second. But I just think, as much as I've seen in my 40 years of living, I can say that appears extremely unfair to have a person who's biologically a male to compete against a person who's biologically female. It seems very unfair, and that person would be at an advantage. When you look at the women's world record, it's, for as fast as she is and as amazing as she is, it's a lower rate of speed than the male record, and whether it's lifting and other things across the board. I'm not saying that there won't be an Amazon that was as big as Goliath who can't, looks like Shaq and who can't do some amazing things. Mm-hmm. But I'm talking about across the board in terms of competing and trying to achieve for your sport. Mm-hmm. It seems unfair to me.
I mean, I guess my question with the transgender community is, there seems to be an issue whenever society says, okay, well, we'll create something for you. There seems to be an issue with that. Then it's like, well, no, we want to be treated as a specific gender. When the easier fix would have been to create a separate,
a whole different
league.
Lane. Oh, yeah.
Because the reality is, there's still going to be differences between a female to male and a male to a female.
Yeah.
So
how would that
we
work?
can't just lump y'all into just straight females and males. So I mean, it just goes across the board. Even when we talk about transgendered in the military, that's a whole nother thing for me as well, because I have a cousin that's going through, that did the transformation. Love my cousin, and everything looks cool, but I'm sure there's other stuff that he deals with psychologically and all that other stuff that has to be accounted for when you say, okay, we're going to accept transgender into the military. Okay, how long have they been transgender is my question.
What difference does that
because
make?
if I've been transgender for 50 years and I've just versus somebody who's been a transgender for a year, my psychological thing is going to be different.
The psychological testing is required for anybody who's going to put themselves through that situation.
I agree.
People can come home and they can be cisgender and still come home and really struggle or take their own lives. That happens all the time. So
yeah, but I don't think it's solely just that. I think there's just other stuff. I always talk about the episode with Orange is the New Black, when they put Laverne Cox in prison, and she was used to having her medications and all this other stuff, and she really fell apart because she couldn't have access to that stuff. When we send you off to Afghanistan,
it's different.
How are you going to get that stuff that pretty much keeps you together?
But like up until this ban, that wasn't an issue.
Well, I know, that's what I'm saying.
So it's like, but to the same extent that, well, women need tampons and men don't, that's an extra expense. Yeah, it is. It is. It's just an extra expense.
Yeah, but we're not talking about just money, though. We're talking about psychological stuff.
No, they were really talking about
factors.
money. They were saying that it could be too expensive for us. That's what they came down to. You can't claim that a trans person has any more psychological needs than plenty of straight people with plenty of psychological needs.
And I
think all these mass shooters so far has been straight people. So we can't say that psychological.
And you're right. I'm just saying, but there has to be an accountability factor that people have done research to say this is definitively what they will need, versus just saying, hey, come on, transgenders, we're going to send you on over to Afghanistan and give you some guns and shoot up everything you see.
That's an easy answer. Nobody knows definitively what anyone will need. We are like 12 generations removed from slavery, and we're not clear whether or not we have everything we need, whether or not we are still suffering, whether or not we are still triggered.
Oh, we're very clear that there are things we do. We're very clear.
Okay, so maybe before they said, well, before we hold on and get rid of the slavery crap, let's make sure we know what these N-words will need. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, that argument doesn't...
Somebody did the research.
Oh, they did their research.
Somebody did research.
I think
somebody did the research.
You guys are going way out on left field now. I mean, I think when
I'm
we're
just trying to use that argument
against,
because that argument doesn't hold up. It doesn't work. It's not enough. You cannot say, let's figure out exactly what these people will need before we give them any rights at all.
But I'm just saying
that's just not how it works.
I just think it's a whole. We're talking about a group of ethnicities. Now we're talking about completely different, a whole nother, you can't even say gender, because when you say gender, people typically think male and female. So you can't even say a whole nother gender. So it's a whole different ballgame that we need to stop doing knee-jerk reactions. Now, as it pertains to this particular story, I kind of agree with Joanne. I mean, you can't, it's technically not fair. And if you're going to do that, it's just like, and I think about boxing, and they have the different types, the lightweights and the heavyweights and all these other types of classes. it's got to be something like that. You can't just say because you identify as a woman, you can participate in women's sports. It can't be that simple because then you're going to start dealing with a lot more stuff like this. And, it's all fun and games if somebody loses a scholarship.
Yeah.
Or it's all fun and games if somebody can't get money because they've been unfairly exiled in something they should be leading in.
Yeah.
So I think that
my only thing is you're going to have to come up with something substantial, something
Absolutely.
scientific, something evidence-based. You're going to need enough resources to determine what it is. It can't just be how we feel or what we think or what's always been the case. That should not be the reason why.
I agree.
Why they can't go on. So the money's going to have to come from somewhere, or the research, or maybe this lawsuit will set a precedent. I don't know, but I definitely don't trust, and I don't know who does, society enough to use their own feelings to determine what people should have access to or not have access to. That's not a fair. Feelings aren't fair either.
Yeah, I mean, but again,
anybody's feelings.
Again,
Whether
this
you're
story
on
only
one side of the
took
argument or the
precedent
other.
because they've lost legitimately. Like, not being able to get scholarships, not being able to get the money you need to go to school based on probably something you work for all your life to get better at sports. Yeah, we got to come with a better formula.
It's something to think about because the implications are greater even beyond sports. When I think about SEC football and I think about who has access to what. Like, look at the sport. What if we have transgendered males represented as the first female? I mean, transgenders who are biologically a male represented as the first females playing football. Is that from ethical or how do you say it? Record-breaking standpoint? Is that a true statement? I mean, think about that. I mean, the way how traditionally you look at things and how we look at things in the new era that we're in with new definitions, new possibilities for human rights. So there's a lot of implications for this, and we just have to really think about how we treat people equitably on all levels.
Well, I mean, and this conversation's not going to go away because, right now we have Pete Buttigieg, who is a gay man with a husband. So if he wins, there's not a first lady, there's a first man.
Yeah.
I still don't get
these
what
are
difference that makes.
I don't know why we keep having this conversation.
First lady for who cares?
It's a whole different ball game.
How does he need to have what?
Do I even need
the
to
room
break?
has to be on a
First
different
of all,
side of the room? Like,
do
what
I
difference
need?
does it make?
No, I'm outside of just us. You have to
we
look
gotta
at
paint the
how.
walls a different color?
Oh my God!
I
You
just
got to
don't
look
think-
at the way. Okay, case in point. You gotta have. We already have a strained relationship with places like Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia, who are to the point they will put people to death for
Oh, yeah.
homosexuality.
Oh, yeah.
Now the leader of the free world has a husband.
Yeah.
You don't think that's gonna change the game?
I don't think America's in the business of stooping to the levels of hate in other countries for the purpose of doing.
Well, it's not
things.
about being hate, but we still have to have, we still have to keep that in mind moving forward. How will the world feel when you have two men and one happens to be the first man, not the first woman? Like,
Look,
this is a whole different ball
Look,
game.
we had a black president, and we still do business. You know what I mean? We still do business with a lot of
Really?
people are gonna be upset. We're not in the business of bending over for the sake of people being, no pun intended, for the sake of other people being upset. That
was a
bad
family
analogy.
pun, yeah.
I'm just saying, it's something we have to really think about because it's not, unfortunately, for all intents and purposes, we still
You just
the bigger
you
person.
just are so dumbfounded by the
And
first man idea, and I just don't get why it's a big-
I'm sorry. It's a whole different ball game to me, having a first man versus a first lady and their roles. Now, I mean, if he wants to go around decorating stuff, kissing babies and shaking hands in the White House and doing musicals, and
I absolutely
go
think
for
that it's
it.
a big deal, and I think
It is.
It's not only is it a
I don't
big
know why you keep
deal, but
minimizing
it's
it.
unprecedented.
Because it doesn't change anything for me. Like I said, it doesn't change
For
a
you.
dang thing. I mean, for who? Like, who's gonna wake up later on Wednesday than they would have otherwise if there's a first man? Like,
Oh,
who's gonna
good
catch
grief.
the flu? Like, what cloud's gonna fall from the sky?
Speaking of the
This
flu,
is not gonna make a big difference.
Speaking of the flu, the coronavirus.
Yeah.
On our
Big
last
one.
note, 'cause we gotta go.
Wow.
The latest update is some countries are working to evaluate passengers from the Diamond Princess cruise ship that has been quarantined in Japanese waters since February 3rd. The
They're on
problem
their way
is
to the US.
there are at least 359 people on board who have been diagnosed with the virus. The U.S. has already begun evacuating some of the more than 400 Americans on board with the understanding that they will undergo a mandatory 14-day quarantine once off the ship. Canada, Italy, and Hong Kong are also sending evacuation flights for their citizens, while some passengers wait to get out. Cases of the virus on the board are continuing to rise. Of course, what else can they do? And 14 of the Americans already being evacuated have tested positive for the coronavirus. The virus has killed 1,775 people so far and sickened more than 71,000 worldwide. I don't know what to say.
Lysol.
Quarantine.
I don't even think that's gonna work. Your little mask won't
Have
even
you
work.
seen the Lysol?
I mean, does it say specific for
99%?
coronavirus?
It does indeed.
Oh my God, I'm done with that. on that, on that note.
That's a low,
No, but please look at your bottle of Lysol.
That is a marketing campaign in poor taste, Lysol. Shame on Lysol.
No.
I mean, look, if
for
it's
years.
now
It always
covering,
said coronavirus?
Yes, it always did. It
yeah,
always
apparently
did.
somebody did circle it in the ingredients
It
on the
always
back of the
has.
bottle. Apparently, it's been there. We just
But
never knew.
It's always been there, but I guess I was trying to make some lightness
sure you
of
do.
it. So in your house, make sure to keep your hands washed. Don't touch your face, like they say. But I mean, I think the bottom line is it's just showing how interconnected we are, Lord, as people, because we see ourselves as like, oh, we're in America. The things we do don't impact this group. It's very, very scary that something that will happen in a little province called Wuhan is now on everybody's mind. You still can't believe on
This was here. But here? Where?
It's
on the West Coast?
somebody really.
East Coast?
It's already here.
Well,
thought
she's
there
talking
were
about the fact that
isolated
it's
cases
in the stuff we already have been using, that it's in the ingredients. Yeah.
Well, no, these new cases.
Oh, I don't.
I saw the cruise ship. Was it on the East? How close is
No,
it to
they-
here?
they've
How
had-
close is it to here?
I don't.
It's on the East Coast.
East and West.
They need to cancel travel. They
Well,
need to
they're
cancel
trying-
everyone's travel.
What they're trying to say is, from what I keep reading, it apparently travels with Chinese people. That's what they keep trying to say. Because
You
one
better be
person,
careful saying that.
that's what they're saying.
That
Because
started xenophobia.
I'm saying because they said that one visitor went to France and had it, and now it's in France. That's what they're saying. I don't know how true it is, but that's what they keep putting out, that it's traveling with them, and that's why they're the heaviest on that particular region of the world. Now, I don't know. Please do your research, because, again, now...
Every time I hear about it, it's travel related, it's cruise related, it's flight related. I just think
they're saying it's traveling with
transportation.
people.
It started. It's not.
But it's traveling with people.
They're saying it's traveling with a certain...
So the
type of people.
Wuhan virus was.
I'm telling you what they're saying.
Y'all listen now. The Wuhan virus it came out in Wuhan, but Wuhan.
Where's Wuhan?
It's a province in China, but it's also a site where they do biological testing. So
it's like
the
Area
question-
51.
The question is, was it let out on purpose? Was it accidentally let out? What went on? And yes, it was with the people, but it's not just because they innately were Chinese and so no. It was somehow exposed in that area.
So now we live in Resident Evil, because that's how Resident Evil started.
I don't even know the story.
Here's the thing.
So now these people, the doctor tried to alert, the doctor that ultimately died, tried to alert people, say, hey, we're noticing these cases, these symptoms is very symptomatic, close to the flu, but people suffer from respiratory, they fall over, they die, so forth, and it's very deadly. It's higher rate than the flu. My point is, these people were starting to travel all over the world. They didn't even know. So there's outbreaks all over the world. And it's not just with Chinese, because they didn't know in the
I
beginning.
didn't say this.
So,
I'm saying what I read.
no, but I'm just trying to tell you, it did originate. You were right. It did. And
But
what
it's
you
not
read
just
is
a Chinese
accurate.
disease.
But because it's already
say
spread
that.
all over to Australia, to this place, because Chinese people are citizens of the world. So some people, it was around the Lunar New Year, people were going back to see their family, and then they were coming back home. People went out. So it's everywhere.
I'm not going nowhere.
So basically, if you've been to Wuhan or in contact with somebody from the Wuhan area, Providence, you might be a candidate.
That's correct.
All right.
We just want us to be careful, because there is a generation of us, especially, of lots of people, but especially among our own culture, that can be very conspiracy prone, and we can sometimes be a little bit irrational about things like this. Ricardo, I'm just going to
This
say
isn't a conspiracy.
I feel
This
like
was
you-
real.
some of us can be a little and then we started doing irrational things. I was just watching videos the other day on CNN during New Day. Allison Camerata reporting on people just attacking random people who appear Asian to
it's
them
foolishness.
because they
Yeah.
believe that it's so. And we can't do
You attack the person, you might get it. That don't even make sense. So just leave people alone.
And on that note, we will see you guys next week, same time, same place, on the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo D.
Just
Rice.
love everybody.
You're listening to the Leadership Blend podcast
I'm ready.
on the Thinking Out Loud Network. Check out the Thinking Out Loud Network at thinkingoutloudnetwork.com.